So we're wrapping up the Stanley Cup Finals. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, looking like the Panthers are going to win the cup this year. So as that's kind of winding down, we start to get into more off-season news. And with off-season news, especially at this point in the off-season, a lot of it is mostly just rumors and he said she said. And while a lot of these may not come true, some of them end up having some credibility to them. So we're going to talk about three big trade rumors and reports that we've been hearing. Um, the three that we're going to talk about today are the potential of Nikolai Ehlers from the Jets getting traded, Jacob Markstrom from the Flames, and Patrick Laine from the Blue Jackets. Now, we'll start with Ehlers, not necessarily because he's the biggest name, although I think you could make a case for that. I think it's between him or Markstrom at this point in their careers. Um, I think it's more so because it's the one where I feel like we've heard the least about. Where Markstrom has been a thing, obviously, for almost it feels like a year at this point, where his name is being floated in trade rumors. And Line A, I don't think it's shocking that he wants out of Columbus, given the situation there, and he's struggled quite a bit there. Whereas Ehlers, it's been the first time it's sort of come up. Um, the big thing, the report by Darren Dreger was talking about how Winnipeg would like to extend Ehlers, but the big issue is Kyle Connor also coming up for a contract. Who are they going to prioritize? Is one of them's probably going to have to get the short end of the stick. We talked about them recently re-signing. Last year, they re-signed Scheifele and Hallebuck to massive contracts, so they don't have a lot of cap space left. Now, Simon, I'll throw it back to you. Do you think an Ehlers trade is going to happen? And if so, um, what teams are you kind of looking and saying, oh, he might go here?
Well, I think it's definitely possible, just when you look at the type of team that Winnipeg is. I think you made a really good point there in the fact that that Kyle Connor deal is probably coming up here, and between the two of them, it's probably going to be Ehlers getting the odd end of the stick on that one. Just considering when you look at the two players, it's not much of an argument over which Winnipeg would want to keep. Best case scenario, I'm sure they'd like to keep both, but that's not how the world works with the salary cap. And considering they already signed both Hellebuck and Scheifele for long deals, I mean, I think it's certainly possible. I don't think they'll be in a rush to do it because I highly doubt Ehlers has caused any real issues that have made them need to move on from him. But I'm sure a lot of teams will be very interested in getting him. And we're sort of seeing that already with I'm looking at a few articles here from a few different, mainly Daily Faceoff was the first one I found on where he might end up. And the first thing that I noticed is the list that they have is a good mix of contenders. It's a good mix of up and coming teams. It's overall there's just a lot of diversity in it, which I don't feel like you always see. I think a lot of times you can see a lot of players wanting to either almost entirely go to like contenders, which is usually the case, or you'll see the rare player who maybe wants to go to an up and coming young team. For this guy, it's all over the boards. I mean, immediately you see Boston Bruins right off the jump here. Then it goes to Buffalo, two teams in very different situations, with the Bruins obviously being older, Sabres obviously being younger. Just going down the list: Carolina Hurricanes, Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Red Wings, New York Islanders, Ottawa Senators, and Seattle Kraken make out the rest of the list. A lot of teams from all over the standings as a whole. So I think he'd make. I think a lot of those teams have a lot of good players to give. And the big thing that you see in this article as well, and that is brought up a lot, that I think is a really good point to just bring up, is Ehlers would be a good replacement for pretty much any player that these teams would be losing in free agency. Like I think for for the Hurricanes, with Gensel, I believe is their big guy who they might lose here. If he ends up walking in free agency and they get Ehlers, that's not that much of a drop off, and he certainly would slide
I
right
think
in there.
that's pretty much a wash.
Yeah.
I think even they might get better with Ehlers, honestly. I
Okay,
think very highly of Ehlers.
that's fair. He has a
I think
hell
he's
of a
been very
shot.
underrated. He has a hell of a shot. I think just in the midst of this, I think Winnipeg being a small market hurts his overall, like, in terms of how well known he is in the NHL as a whole. I think he does kind of get overshadowed a lot, but even in like some of the playoff series when Winnipeg played against Calgary in 2020, where it was like the weird COVID year, I thought Ehlers was the best player on their team during
That's
those
fair.
games. He was the one I was most scared of. And obviously that was a while ago, but it's not like he's fallen off since then. He's continued to produce. He's had some issues with injuries, but nothing that I'd be overly concerned about. I think if he goes to a bigger market and is able to get good minutes where he's expected to play on like the first, second line kind of deal, like top six guy, um, I feel like that could just be great for his career to have a new spot. Not necessarily because it's not working in Winnipeg, just because I think a change of pace, a change of location could be good for him.
Yeah, and I do agree with you in a sense. You're very high on Ehlers. I'm really high on Gensel. I think Gensel in a lot of ways is underrated as well. I think he's a hell of a player. But I'm high on Ehlers as well. I think he's really, really good. I think he's got one of the best shots. He probably has the most underrated shot in the NHL, honestly. Like, that thing is insanely quick. Every time I've gotten to watch it, especially in that series against the Flames, like, I don't even know how the hell you get in front of that. I
Yeah,
think, a new situation will probably be good for him, just because while he has been very good, off of memory, and I am pulling up stats to actually back this up, I don't think he's necessarily jumped through that next level that a lot of people have sort of expected out of him. Yeah. Like this last season, 17, or no, wait, I'm on the wrong end of things here. This last season, 82 games, 61 points, right? Season before he got
yeah,
hurt, 45 games, 38 points, which is actually pretty good. So he was obviously doing well before he got hurt. 62 games, 55. A lot of like injuries have been an issue for him, obviously. Playing full seasons has been tough. Although he did that in his last season here. It's just about maintaining that oh, excuse me. Maintaining that high scoring like style over like a full season. That's been the tough thing for him. If he can do that and get put on a really, really good line, which he will have the opportunity to do with, I think the example we've been using is the Hurricanes. If he goes there, he'll be given that opportunity and he could probably have a career year. Like, I think the bar isn't
yeah.
necessarily too high for him. I think it's 64 points. And I think he absolutely has the potential to break through that. Like, he has all the skill in the world.
Agreed.
The most goals he's ever scored is 29, which is weird. He feels like a guy that would be a constant 30 goal threat. But he's never got there in his career. And I think this will be a new spot, might be good for him to finally get through that glass ceiling that we've seen from him for the last little bit, right? And I think that'll be huge for him. Whether it happens, I would probably give it a 50-50. Like, the fact that I haven't heard a lot of rumors about it doesn't necessarily make me confident. Because I think if... but then again, that could just mean that...
I think it was a recent thing. I think it was
Yeah,
a recent thing that it came out.
yeah.
Um,
And that's not a bad thing either. I think if this continues to be a talking point for the next few weeks, I'll get a bit more confident on it happening. But this also could absolutely just be off-season chatter. The Jets just shopping around one of their forwards that they don't know if they can pay. So,
yeah,
who knows? I do think a new spot would be interesting for him. I will throw this over to you one more time here before we move on to our next player.
Yep.
Um, I'll list off the teams again here, being the Bruins, the Sabres, the Hurricanes, the Blackhawks, the Red Wings, the Islanders, the Senators, and the Kraken. That's a lot of teams, but
yeah.
even then, if you could pick a favorite for where you think he would probably fit in the best, and if you want to go off that list, go nuts. But just out in general, as a fantasy pick, if you could pick where Ehlers is going next, where would you want to send him?
So I do like the Carolina pick. I think that's the one where he can just kind of slot in instantly and be a nice contributor. And I think that would be obviously the best supporting cast he's ever had, and I think that'll give him a huge chance to grow. I do think it would be the one downside. He's not going to be the central focus, right? He's going to be like he's going to be playing second line, like he's going to be a focus, but it's not going to be like you're coming in and being the star. That's not really how Carolina as a team
That's not
works,
how it was in
honestly.
Winnipeg for him, though, either.
No, and I'm saying that like that's how that could work if he wants something different, which we aren't necessarily getting. This isn't he wants out. It's more so just cap casualty. So if he
Yeah.
wants more of the same, I think that's where you go. I think the other place that would be interesting where you can, I think, be more of that number one star or at least 1A, 1B kind of thing would be Buffalo. And I think that would
Ooh.
be more so just a great move for the Sabres in terms of trying to make moves to win now, because I feel like we had a lot of hype on them going into this year and it all kind of fell flat and they weren't able to replicate a lot of the promise that they had shown a couple of years ago. And I think if you want to try to take advantage of that and try to really throw some life back into this rebuild, then I think what you do is you throw a guy like Nikolai Ehlers in there, and I think any guy with that much talent could revitalize your franchise. So I think those probably are the two spots where I'm saying this is the most interesting to me.
I think I almost like Buffalo more than I like the Hurricanes. Like, I
Mm,
think that almost makes too much sense because a lot of their issues came offensively with this last season being the fact that power play sucked. They couldn't score even when they weren't on the power play, and it was a big reason that they were as bad and just under developed looked as bad as they did in this last season. I think a guy like Ehlers would instantly turn that. Maybe not. Okay, I won't make that prediction, but I think it would help them a lot. And I think he does slide in on a first line over there, if not a second line and first power play spot, which I think would be perfect for him. Like, I don't think he needs to be the star player on any team. We should move on, but I do think that a spot like Buffalo would make a lot of sense for him.
yeah.
Although, at least for like the one argument I will make against it is you're not moving up if you're going to Buffalo in the same way you would be moving up if you're going to the Hurricanes. So if he
In terms
wants,
of situation, yeah.
yeah, if he wants a cup, go to the Hurricanes. If you want a
Well,
spot,
there's potential in Buffalo. There's potential in Buffalo.
potential
Like
that
I
we
do
haven't
think,
seen yet. We've seen that
yeah,
potential out of the
that's fair.
Hurricanes. I guess that'd
Yeah,
be my one point. But yeah,
yeah,
we should move on. I think the next. Did we want to go to Markstrom next here?
yeah.
Do you want
Let's
to do
go
that?
to Markstrom.
Sounds good. The Markstrom one has been very interesting because this has been a conversation for almost 6 months, I think, at this point. Just with whether the Flames were going to move on from him. At this point, I think it's pretty much confirmed that he's got one foot out the door. I think he's expected to be moving on. It's just coming down to where. It
Yeah,
was New Jersey for the longest time. A newcomer that has started to gain a lot of traction is Ottawa, which is a very interesting one because a lot of their issues came from goaltending this year. But then again, you never know with a player like Markstrom. He's such a good goaltender that I think a lot of teams would probably be interested in him. So it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up where he ends up going. I think to get the conversation going right off the jump, I'll ask you this: uh, if you have a preference of trading him, at least let's look at it from Markstrom's point of view first. Would you rather go to the Senators or would you rather go to New Jersey? Two teams
and
that
that's
both
actually
underplayed in this last season. Just
yeah,
like
and
both
I
did.
think that's actually really interesting. I think my gut says New Jersey because I think they're closer to their ultimate goal than the Senators are, even though they really did underperform last year. Um, I think just because they did make the playoffs the year before, right? I think they have better young talent. I think the Senators still have a few more things to figure out than just goaltending. Whereas New Jersey, I do think goaltending is more of like a aha moment where you kind of snap that piece in and everything kind of clicks. I think that I do think the Senators is another interesting option, though, because as much as I think New Jersey is further ahead, I think it's a very similar thing for Ottawa, where obviously, like you said, they didn't get great goaltending last year, and there was like definitely higher expectations for where they should be at this point in their rebuild. Um, and so I think getting a guy like Markstrom, who, well, he's kind of been up and down in Calgary, has proven, especially last year, the level that he can play up to. I think if either of those teams get those goaltending, I think that level of goaltending, I think maybe they do improve to the point where they're sneaking into a playoff spot. So I think it'll be really interesting. I think the fact that there is multiple teams like the Senators jumping in is great for the Flames because I think the location is really interesting for where he goes, but I also think the return or trade for Calgary is the other most interesting part. Not just because I'm a Flames fan, just because I think it's really interesting to see what the value is going to be.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with that as well. I was going to ask you how much. Another thing I want to throw in there. How much do you think a draft pick changes things for either side there? I don't know when the
Green Simon.
Oh my god! I gotta stop throwing photos up there. Jesus. Anyway, I don't know where the Senators and Ottawa pick, or the Senators and the Devils pick right off the top of my head. I do think New Jersey is like. I think New Jersey is 6. I'm just gonna look up NHL draft,
Yeah, I'm doing the same.
and
Um,
we can figure out where teams are. But let's
so it
see.
seems like
So
um,
oh I'm completely off.
Ottawa's
Ottawa
7,
Ottawa's
New Jersey's
7.
10
Yeah. So to move up, they would have to trade with Ottawa.
with Ottawa.
So if they
Yeah,
could, that doesn't mean that they couldn't trade for New Jersey's first.
and
Like
then maybe you even package 9 and 10 to move up even farther,
that's
right?
true. You could do that.
Then I think it just depends. Like, does New Jersey think that that 10th overall pick is worth Markstrom on its own? I don't know if they necessarily do. Right. I think
Um
that, although the other thing was New Jersey did say, I believe, their GM did come out and say that that pick could be on the move. Like, I think he came out and was like, yeah, no, like, we're open for business or something
yeah.
to that effect.
And with a team like them, I think you have to say that too because I don't think you want to wait around to the same level that the Flames do. Like I don't think Calgary's
Yeah.
in a rush to be making the playoffs here. I think a situation where they're getting a top 7 player is a pretty good one, and I think with a lot of the rumors around how much the fan base wants Iggy's kid, with if the Flames want him, I think it's pretty much been confirmed at this point. They need to move up because
Yeah.
they're not going to get him at 9 unless something absurd happens. So we'll just have to see. It's going to be pretty interesting to see whether it happens or not. I guess the one bright side, if they decide to make that trade with New Jersey, is back picks there. Like having 9 and 10, even if you don't trade up, is pretty nice because of how deep this draft class
Yeah.
is. Like that's been one
Yeah.
conversation that has been had a lot in the Flames fan base is, well, we're not getting Iggy, but if you just look at how deep this draft class is, we're gonna get a really good player at 9. If we had 10, we'd probably get a pretty good player at 10 too. And I think
Yep.
at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say, if we get pick number 7, awesome. But if we trade with the Devils and get number 10, it's not like I'm going to be sitting here and going like, why didn't we try and trade up higher? I'll probably be
Yeah.
thinking, better capitalize on those 2 picks. Or, like you
I,
pointed out, move
yeah.
up even further.
I completely agree with that. I completely agree with pretty much everything you just said. And just to add on to that, with the possibility of having both 9 and 10 for the Flames, the exact quote from the Devils GM, Tom Fitzgerald, was, I haven't gotten anything yet, but the more I talk to teams, I say, listen, I'm open to moving number 10, but it's going to have to be something significant. Now, I think the big question is Markstrom significant enough? I know
Yes.
they've talked openly about wanting goaltending help. Is that enough for a number 10 pick?
I think maybe not like skill. Like skill for skill, if is he good enough for most teams to be willing to trade the 10th pick? Probably not. Are the Devils going to get a better goalie than Markstrom almost anywhere else? Is the question that I'd throw right back at you. Exactly. Like in no other spot, they are not going to
The
set themselves
free
up
agents
better.
this year are not good.
Exactly. Like they are not going to be able to find a better goalie than what you get with Markstrom. And I think for that alone, like brings up his value a little bit. I think it has to. Because
Yeah.
of the fact that the Flames have a monopoly in a sense of the elite goaltenders in a weird way with that, right? So at least to me, I think of it more in that sense of yes, I think New Jersey should be willing to trade that first round pick for Markstrom. Will they do it? We'll see, I guess. But I guess obviously I could be biased as well, but I don't know. I don't think you get a better goalie. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
I think in this market, I don't think there is one out there. I think Markstrom is going to be the prize, and I think that works out amazingly for the Flames. Again, like I said before, I think the competition between the Sens and Flames, between the Sens and Devils, and potentially any other teams that want to jump in the fray, I think that is just going to boost up demand and be even better for the Flames in the long run.
Yep. Well, I think we can move on. I think we can move on to our last player that we need to talk about here. And maybe least. Because he has disappointed in the last couple seasons here, especially with how high the expectations were for him entering the league. We're talking about Patrick Laine, who it sounds like there has been a mutual interest between him and the Columbus Blue Jackets on wanting to move on, which makes a lot of sense because Columbus has not really worked out for him. Most of his big moments came from early in his career playing on the Jets, and since playing for Columbus, he hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been great.
Nope.
Like he hasn't been that next level player that everybody thought he would be, which is the big thing, I think, to me. Because there was conversations about who's the better scorer, Austin Matthews or Patrick Laine. Nobody like actually put that much thought into it, because I think even back then it was pretty obvious. But the fact that argument was even being pushed by literally anybody, I think says a lot. Because the fact that Laine was in that argument to begin with is very impressive for him. But
I agree, and I think that just shows how severe the drop off has been, because like you just mentioned, that was a debate, and it wasn't a debate anybody really blinked an eye at. I think obviously the comparison comes from them being 1-2 in the draft, right? But I think up until a certain point in their careers, I think really before the trade happened to send Laine to Columbus, I think it was a genuine topic of conversation. Now, obviously, Matthews has continued to improve and get better, and Laine has starkly declined. But obviously, still a lot of that potential is here. I think if you're a team that's going to try to get Laine, I think it's a deal that's probably going to come pretty cheap, given his recent production. And I think it's one of those things where it's just kind of like it feels very similar. I know you were really high on this move, Simon, to the Jonathan Drouin signing, but last year, but kind of on a different scale. Drouin, obviously, a lot more time away from the game, but very much a reclamation project to say, here's a player that had a lot of talent and a lot of promise, a lot of potential, and we think we can unlock some of that again. And I think just getting out of Columbus for Laine and being in a new situation, maybe new coach, new voices, new players around him, I think that's going to be a big help, and then also just staying healthy. So I think whatever team gets him, I'm honestly in full support of, because I don't think you have a lot to lose.
Yeah. No, I do agree with that. And even like you wanna talk about potential, if you can even get him back to being the player he was in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about the player that he could have been if he kept going at that trajectory. Let's start by talking about the player he was, which in his
Yeah.
rookie season, 36 goals, played 73 games. Second season, he had his career year, played all 82, 44 goals. The season after that is when the drop off starts. And he still plays 82, but he drops to 30 goals, only 20 assists, which isn't that much lower than his assist totals in the previous season. I will point that out first. But the goals drop, which isn't good for him. And he drops to a 50-point season. The season after that, it goes up a little bit, but he gets hit with the injury bug. 68 games played, 63 points. Not bad, again. Then the next... oh, Jesus. The next year, he played only one game with Winnipeg, in which he had 2 goals, 1 assist, and 3 points. And then they went bye, and he went to Columbus, where he only scored 10 goals for the rest of the year. And so far with Columbus, has not played more than 60 games in a season.
Wow.
With this last season being the worst, with him only having 18. He has
Yeah.
not gotten past 30 goals in a season since 2018-2019. And I mean, it's pretty insane with thinking about how strong of a start he had. It's not like he had
Yeah.
just an insane rookie year. Even with 2018-19 being a pretty big drop-off, 30 goals does not make him a slouch by any means. Like, I think at this point, nobody is saying that Laine is a crap hockey player quite yet, because he can still give you 20 goals. I think we all know that. He can still give you 20 goals on a bad season. But I think the question is, and the reason any team would want to pick him up, is can you get back to that 30-goal player? If you can turn him into a 30-goal player, you're winning. And I think if anything is clear, it won't happen in Columbus. So I'm going to be very curious to see where he goes. I think a lot of... I'm going to quickly see if I can find some spots for him. But what do you say, sir?
I was just gonna say, while you look that up, I'll just jump in and add, like, getting him back to that 30-goal plateau obviously is a huge thing. I think doing that, I think just paying attention to the fact that the stat you brought up, that he hasn't played more than 60 games in any of his seasons in Columbus, I think while the performance has dropped off, I think that injury bug is another thing, right? Just A, not being available, and then B, I don't have any actual evidence on me to back this up, but I'm sure lingering effects, right? If you are injured that much in all 4 seasons you've played in Columbus, that's got to carry over to some point.
Yeah. No.
So I think just being able to have hopefully a season to get healthy and get well. And then also just the one last point is he is still only 26. He's still a young player.
Yes.
He came into the league so young. He's got so much of his career left ahead of him. So I think there's still so much potential on here. You're gonna get a very good young player, or potentially good young player for very cheap. So I think it's a no lose scenario.
Do you want to hear some landing spots?
Absolutely.
All right. A lot of them, my prediction was right. Ehlers does share a few spots with him, which does make sense. But
Makes sense.
yeah, the first one right off the jump, they hit us with Utah, which, I mean, listen, Laine. I know Columbus didn't have a lot for like nature and stuff like that, but do you like big rocks? That is my question for you, Laine. If you like big rocks, you are going to love Utah. And I think a lot of the argument is it'd be a hell of a way for them to kind of immediately jump into things. I mean, in a sense, Utah already is a fresh start for the Arizona Coyotes. Why not turn it into a fresh start for Patrik Laine as well? The next one, which I like a lot, is again one he shared with Ehlers. Ehlers. God, I've been sucking at saying his name right. In Chicago, which they point out in the top line of this little section of the article being, imagine a power play unit with Laine and Bedard. That's funky as hell, and I
Yep.
like it. Carolina Hurricanes, which a lot of the same arguments apply for him, obviously to a lesser degree, but we already sort of talked about that. Washington Capitals, which is very fun, with the argument being, who better to learn from than Ovi? Like, for that style of play,
Yeah.
like, if you can, like, take some tips from Ovi, he has the shot. He could probably turn into a hell of a goal scorer. Lastly, Montreal Canadiens, which, again, is another great one where I almost see that as a sort of Monahan pickup that we saw them do, I think, 2 years down the road now. It would be interesting for Montreal to grab him because I think they're a pretty good spot for him. I don't necessarily think there would be that much expectations, depending on how big the package for him is. I guess if they have to give up a lot, that changes. But if he's a pretty easy guy to pick up, I think he just slides right in with the expectations to be a second or third line scorer, and nothing more past that. So I don't know. I'll
Yep.
ask you the same thing that I asked you with the last one, being if you have a favorite team or a favorite spot that you think makes sense
So
for him.
I'm gonna. So I do. I like all of the teams you brought up. Some more than others. I do think a team like Chicago would be interesting. There's some teams on there like the Capitals. I completely agree with the Ovi point, but that feels more of literally just a development thing because I think once Ovi goes, that team is going to crater pretty hard. Um, and so I don't know if that's necessarily a situation you want to be in your Liney if you're Liney because you kind of just were on a cratering team. If I'm him, I'm kind of looking for a little bit more of a supporting cast that's actually going to carry me into some meaningful hockey past April. Um, the one team that I think is fascinating that wasn't listed on there, and I honestly just when I looked up Patrick Laine, there was an article from TSN that just had a bunch of logos floating by his head, and I was like, oh, that's a very TSN thing to do, but I don't hate this idea. Is with their limited, albeit, but not as limited as you might think, cap space is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Ooh,
Um, I just
Laine
think that
and
would be fun.
Matthews.
Yeah,
That would be
that's
fun.
my I don't even need to say anything more. I think I just say Laine and Matthews. Like I don't
Can
know
I
if you
take your
necessarily put
pick?
them on the same line,
I
but
want to see that.
yeah,
That'd be fun. I don't think they'd play on the same line. That wouldn't make any sense. Like you're putting two snipers
I don't think
together.
so either.
Yeah, like that wouldn't work at all. It'd be two guys who don't want
But
to pass, but
you could
like
do it occasionally for fun,
power play.
you know?
Power play.
Yes. That would be a hell of a power play.
Especially
Well,
if
it
they're
already kind of
losing
is,
Marner.
but yes.
Because
Yes,
losing
honestly.
Marner clears up their cap pretty good. I
Yep.
imagine Laine could probably slide in there pretty easily. So I really like that pick. I don't know if there's
Yep.
any interest on Toronto's side, but I would love the shit out of that if we did get to see it.
Yep. Their current cap space is 18 million. Obviously, they're gonna have to sign some guys. Obviously, they'll bring in people. But currently, they have the space to do it. I don't know how big Line's cap hit is, but
$7
I
million, I
assume it's.
think.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I assume it's not 18 million, so you have space. It is doable.
Oh, give Laine an $18 million contract. Let's see it.
Let's go. Do it.
I am
Cowards.
coward. Exactly. You know what? It's the you got to show that you